Jimmy Page has called it his favourite guitar solo of all time. And no wonder, when Elliot Randall's guitar kicks off Steely Dan's Reelin in the Years, audiences immediately knew they were in for something special. Their first big hit, Reelin in the Years, showcased Steely Dan's phenomenal songwriting and musicianship, fusing together their deep love of jazz's complex harmonies and rhythms alongside blues and rock songwriting. Steely Dan's intellectual approach to music is a hallmark of their long career. Add to that their clever, sarcastic humour, and you get a band and a song unlike any other.
Are you reeling in the years? Stowing away
Hello there, it's Warren Hewitt. Hope you're doing marvellously well. Welcome back to another episode of the series. If you haven't already, please subscribe. If you hit the notification bell, you'll be notified when we have a new video. And if you're into production, you can go to producelikeapro.com and sign up for the email list and get a whole bunch of free goodies. The story of Steely Dan is one of consummate musicianship, cerebral writing and audio polish surrounding its two founding members, Walter Becker and Donald Fagen. The pair met at Bard College, where Fagen was bouncing between the music and English departments. Becker was also a student, a couple of years younger. An accomplished pianist, Fagen was looking for other musicians to play jazz and rock with, but struggled to find anyone who could play in the style he was looking for. One of the problems in those days was finding a guitar player. There were very few guitarists at school, but most still sounded like they were Dick Dale or one of the Ventures. They hadn't quite figured out how to play blues. They sounded sort of amateurish. Passing by a local campus cafe, the Red Balloon, he heard the young Becker practicing his guitar and immediately asked him to start a band together. Fagen remembered he had a little amplifier turned up all the way, bending notes and getting sustain. He'd been listening to all these Howlin' Wolf and B.B. King records. Well, I'd never really heard anything like that. Almost immediately, the pair began writing music together. They were thrilled to find that they had grown up listening to the same records since childhood. Not just rock and roll and popular music they shared with their peers, but a deep knowledge of jazz. We had a lot of common musical background. Donald and I listened to the same jazz radio stations, and we had all the same records. And there weren't many jazz fans around at the time in our particular age group. Making rock and roll that was more sophisticated, harmonically, and more jazz-like was something we had a common interest in. That's exactly what they did, merging together diverse influences and bringing together the most talented musicians they could find. They created musically complex songs that were also immensely popular. But before making their first Steely Dan record, the duo refined their skills playing in local bands and venues. They even performed with future comedian Chevy Chase on drums in a band called the Leather Canary. They started picking up professional gigs as session players and in live backup bands. Their first was their classmate Terry Boona Boylan, who had invited them to play in Jerry Ragavoy's studio, the Hit Factory, in Midtown Manhattan. Soon after that, they began touring as part of the backup band for Jay and the Americans. It was here where they met guitarist Elliot Randall. Randall would go on to play the iconic guitar solo on Reelin in the Years. For a few years, Becker and Fagen scraped together a living as studio musicians in New York, before moving to Los Angeles in 1971. Producer Gary Katz, who they'd worked with in New York, had also relocated to California, and he got the duo a job as staff songwriters for ABC Dunhill Records, where Katz was then working as an A&R man. By 1972, Becker and Fagen had teamed up with the guitarists Denny Diaz and Jeff Baxter, as well as Jim Hodder on drums, and they had begun rehearsing in an unfinished wing of the ABC building. In this early iteration of Steely Dan, Becker was primarily playing bass, while Fagen focused on keyboard. The group pulled their name from a 1959 William S. Burroughs book, Naked Lunch, connecting back to Fagen's history as a beatnik English major at Bard, reading works by Burroughs, Kerouac, and Ginsberg. Within a few weeks, the band was in the recording studio working on their debut album and their hit single, Reelin in the Years. While Steely Dan has had many hits in their long career, Reeling in the Years is undoubtedly one of their greatest. It brings together Fagen and Becker's talent for clever lyrics and cerebral composition, alongside consummate popular songwriting. They had honed their craft writing songs for other musicians, but in creating Steely Dan, they were able to expand their creative palette to embrace the complex musical influences that had inspired them. Reeling in the Years is structurally a clear pop song, with catchy hooks and a memorable singable chorus. But it's also quite thoughtfully constructed. This is especially clear in the song's lyrics, which follow a beautiful parallel structure in each verse. Working on the classic theme of a romantic breakup, each verse starts with a description of the ex-girlfriend or the couple's relationship and ends with the same frustrated bewilderment. I can't understand. In verse 1, the ex is described as holding on to everlasting summer and willing to grab onto anything or perhaps anyone that will give her that illusion. The end of the verse sets up the bitter response to this personality flaw with the verses recurring, I can't understand. Your everlasting summer, you can see it fading fast. So you grabbed a piece of something that you think is gonna last. You wouldn't even know a diamond if you held it in your hand. And the things you think are precious, I can't understand. Notice how the rhymes are perfectly expected, but the way they articulate the words leading up to them are quite clever. In verse 2, the lyrics lament her arrogance and ultimately her ignorance. The circumstances of the weekend at the college can be interpreted many ways, but the effect of the imagery is still perfectly understandable. And once again, we are left with the bitter lover's exasperation in the final line. You've been telling me you're a genius since you were 17. And in all the time I've known you, I still don't know what you mean. The weekend at the college didn't turn out like you planned, and the things that passed for knowledge, I can't understand. Finally, in verse 3, Walter and Fagen place a subtle but effective turn in the lyrics. Instead of hearing about the ex's flaws, the verse details his frustration with all of the effort he had placed into the failed relationship. I spent a lot of money, I spent a lot of time. The trip we made to Hollywood is etched upon my mind. But even with this shift, the parallel structure remains. After all the things we've done and seen, you find another man. The things you think are useless, I can't understand. The chorus is catchy and beautifully rhymed. Are you reeling in the years, stowing away the time? Are you gathering up the tears? Have you had enough of mine? And it repeats each time. By the time you get to the second verse, you've already heard it twice and memorized all the words. This is further facilitated brilliantly by Elliot Randall's guitar introduction to the song, which introduced the chorus melodic ideas to the listener even before they've heard it sung. Reeling in the Years and the rest of Steely Dan's debut album, Can't Buy a Thrill, was recorded in August of 1972 at the iconic Village Recorder in West Los Angeles. The album features Steely Dan's original band of Jeff "Skunk" Baxter on guitar and pedal steel guitar, Denny Diaz on guitar and electric sitar. Becker plays electric bass guitar and sings background vocals. The lead vocal role is actually shared between three members, as Donald Fagen was feeling increasingly uncomfortable singing lead. At first, drummer Jimmy Hodder tried his hand at lead, singing the vocals for the band's first single, Dallas. For the album, he took the role of lead vocals for one track, Midnight Cruiser. But those surrounding the band continued to try to convince Fagen to sing his own songs. They ended up bringing in David Palmer to sing lead vocals. He sings lead vocals on Dirty Work and Brooklyn. But Katz was still convinced Fagen should be singing. Fagen recalls the struggle. I think they had a conflict about it. On the one hand, because Walter and I wrote them, we knew what they were about and understood the best attitude that was best to convey them. They had realized I could do that. On the other hand, I had a very small range and really hardly any experience and sort of looked at it two ways. On the one hand, they wanted somebody with a bigger voice, a kind of thrilling rock and roll vocalist, But I think we knew we weren't going to find anybody who could convey the attitude, which was really the most important thing. So they wanted me to do it. Fagen's vocal limitations required them to adjust some of the song's melodies. But ultimately, it is his phenomenal attitude in the performance that carries the lead vocals of Reelin in the Years. In addition to the band's 6-piece original lineup, the group brought in several experienced session musicians to record on the Can't Buy Me Thrill album, including Victor Feldman on percussion, Jerome Richardson on tenor saxophone, and Snooky Young on flugelhorn. The songs Brooklyn and Kings feature the backing vocals of Clyde King, Shirley Matthews, and Vanetta Fields. But of course, it is their old buddy from Jay and the Americans, guitarist Elliot Randall, who really shines on the album for his iconic performance on Reelin in the Years.
So I'm out in LA, and Donald and Walsh get hold of me and say, hey, we hear you're out here. We're doing an album. Would you come and play? Obvious response was, sure. When should I show up and where do I go to? So it was Village Recorders. It was I don't even remember what season it was, although I suspect it was spring or summer. And I walk in the studio. This is the first session I did for them, which is Reelin in the Years. And
nice way to start.
It was a lovely way to start. Of course, I used to do demos for them back in New York on some of their earlier material. So we know each other from being in the backing band for Jay and the Americans.
Randall was brought in to energize the almost finished Reelin in the Years with his guitar talents, and that's exactly what he did.
They came in, they said, here's the song, we'll play it down for you once. I listened to it, I thought, oh, that's really nice. And then I said, can you give me a set of lyrics? Do you have them around? Let me see what it is that I'm playing to. By that time, I had already adopted the idea of it's best to know what the mood of the song is before you set your own musical tapestry. I read the words. Okay, let's run it through once more. And we did. I dare say it was a pretty exciting take. And Gary Katz went to the assistant. He said, did he get that? Well, no, it was just a run through. And Gary goes, oh, no. All right, let's do another one. So the second take, which is really the first recorded take, was literally the take that we did that you hear in its entirety. It was just something got me going. I mean, the intro, it's just a takeoff on the chorus, right? It's just like what a jazz saxophonist would play, at the intro to something he had just heard. And then the answers to the various bits, were all in there and all the way to the end. And we stopped the take and it was like, that's it. Nobody said, can we try it again? So I was delighted. They were happy. And, you hear what you hear. It's I'm still very, very proud of it today.
Despite it having been recorded in only the second take, Randall's guitar part has received well-deserved acclaim. Jimmy Page has even told Classic Rock magazine in 1999 that it was his favourite guitar solo of all time. For Randall, creating the solo was all about making the right choices at the right time.
No, see, I'm not being modest. I mean, but the song virtually played itself. There was something about it that made it. And in terms of the music, the changes, it's actually quite simple. It's a flat 7-chord major to a 1, repeat, down to a 6-chord, then it repeats again, and then the verses become somewhat different. But the stuff that I was doing, actually, technically and theoretically, I was playing against stuff that wasn't all that demanding. I mean, all that might be demanded is the amount of taste that you put in. And of course, as someone who now looks at the umbrella down from the top of the umbrella, it's got to, not interfere with anything else that's going on. It's got to complement it. And it needs to be within a certain range. I could have played too high, I could have played too low. But somehow on this session, I wound up playing what everybody thought was everything, being what they wanted. So that makes me a happy guy.
everyone, Jamie Humphreys here, and Warren has asked me to take part in this video, taking a look at two of the solos performed by Elliot Randall on the classic Steely Dan track Reelin in the Years. So before we get into the solos, let's just talk a little bit about the equipment. Elliot Randall played a 1963 Fender Stratocaster with a Gibson humbucker fitted in the neck, and it was plugged into an Ampeg bass amp with an 8x10 cabinet of all things, rather unorthodox setup that produced a very unique tone. Now, I don't actually own a Strat. I know that's a crime. I own Music Man equivalents. I was more of a Telecaster person. I have a few tellies, but I'm using my Music Man Axis Super Sport. This has been my main guitar now for 21 years. The reason I'm using this guitar is that it has DiMarzio 36th anniversary PAFs in it, and these are very low output, very classic sounding pickups, and I felt that this pickup would do quite a good impersonation of the pickup in the neck of Elliot's guitar, albeit that the look of the guitar is absolutely nothing like his Strat. Now, I'm running my guitar into my IK Multimedia Axe.io, and I'm using Amplitude 5, where I'm using an Ampeg bass amp with an 8x10, and I'm using a 414. And I've put a booster before it just to drive the amp a little bit more, obviously relying on modeling to get this tone. There's going to have to be a little bit of artistic license when trying to achieve it. So let's now take a look at the solos. The first solo is the intro solo. Both of the solos are performed over the same chord progression, going between the chords of G and A, chord 4 and chord 5 of the D major scale. So we have a very strong A mixolydian sound. A lot of the solo is based around the minor pentatonic and the blues scale, and we're pulling the minor third ever so slightly sharp to hint at the major third, having that tension and release. But there's a few other really cool little tricks going on in this on both of the solos that make them very interesting. So we kick the first solo off with this little figure. Have this cool little chromatic pattern here, pulling off from 7, 6 and 5 on the B, and then back up again. So you're actually coming in on the and of 1. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. We have some little mutes. Then this sliding lick. Little hammer on pull off there. That's our first example there of pulling that minor third ever so slightly sharp, sort of hinting at the major third. Let's have a look at that intro portion again. One of the things I love about this solo is the groove. It's just a constant groove throughout. It's such a rhythmical solo, and Elliot is so in the pocket with these runs and these little phrases. Okay, here's the next lick. Little hammer on and pull off lick. We have some Hendrix-inspired little double stop. Okay, here we're really outlining the G chord. We have a G triad. There we're playing some sixths, and final interval is a fifth. So we have. So if you're sliding in on the G string, and your note on the top E, if you like, is each note of the G triad. So you have a G, a B, and a D. So you're outlining that G chord with each part of this phrase, if you like. So there's the G triad. There's the sixth interval, and then the fifth. Okay, one more time. Then we have more of those mutes, little percussive mutes, and then we're sliding. There we have another sixth. And then we're descending. We start off in triplets. So as you're picking, you're then sliding down through the scale. So you're sliding down through that A mixolydian mode, that fifth mode of the D major scale. So put that whole section together. Now, this is a particularly troublesome section. I really struggled with this lick where you're outlining a G major triad. We have this. So you're basically holding that chord shape and you're just arpeggiating it. But rhythmically, it's quite complex to get, and also you're jumping over the strings. Then we have that little chromatic climb there from the B note. Open A, which allows you to jump positions. Okay, so now let's play through the entire solo slowly so you really get an idea of each of the phrases. Here we go. Okay, so let's now take a look at the second solo. This is the middle solo, and once again, we're playing over the same chord progression. We're starting off with this really big bend, a big tone and a half bend here, starting on the 12th fret at the top E. Then two slides. You're sliding from the major third, that C sharp note, up to the note of D. Then from the B up to the C sharp. So you're really outlining that major A major tonality. Then we have that little chromatic figure that we saw in the introduction with a slide. There we have another one of those bluesy bends pulling the minor third. Moving up to that A major pentatonic sound. Now this figure here, this is the tricky figure. We have this part first of all. Now he's kind of playing straight over the top. I must admit, I found that quite tricky to play that, to really get the picking, because you're playing over this triplet groove, and I did cheat a little bit. I was picking half of it, so I found that a little bit easier to really get it into the pocket. A really, really difficult, a deceptively tricky little passage to play. So that chromatic figure. And then you're climbing up chromatically. Now for this part, we're playing this little figure. But as you're doing that, you start to bring in the open A string. So you get this. Okay, let's have a look at that entire first section of the solo. Here we go. I must admit that section there where you're moving up chromatically, you sort of fall into that part a little bit. I sort of made sure that I targeted that C sharp note. Then we have this figure here. Once we've climbed up, he's just pulling off between the 14th fret and the 12th fret of the G with just different picking patterns. So and that's quite a tricky figure there. And then he descends, keeps that same pattern and descends back through the scale. Now we're back into that A minor pentatonic scale, that familiar shape. Flat 5, there's your blues note. Top 2 strings at the 5th. Okay, let's play through the entire solo now slowly. Here we go.
So Jamie's taken us through the guitar solos by Elliot Randall, which are absolutely wonderful and signature and such a huge part of this song. Then, of course, there's the Danny Diaz part. Which is great, and Scott Baxter plays the harmony to it, and I absolutely love it. But let's not forget that the chord sequence in the verse is amazing. It's so good. It's just super hooky. When you can take a chord part and turn it into a hook of a song, it drives the whole song forward. It's quite simple, but complicated because it's a fast tempo. So it's the A, the B minor 7th, the C sharp minor 7th, the D, and then an A with a major 3rd in the bass, back to the B minor 7th. And it does that twice. And then this next time it does the first 2, and it goes to the E minor 7th, and then a diminished chord on the E flat, and then a D minor 7th, and then an A with a C sharp in the bass. So you get this beautiful climb down. So when you hear the bass, it's just a great climb down. I mean, Steely Dan were the masters of beautiful chord progressions. And then the chorus and the intro part and the bridge and everything is just this, it's a G and an A, but you hear this 9th. Gorgeous chord sequence. I absolutely love it. Fantastic. In terms of gear, Randall remembers exactly what he was playing when he made the recording.
It was my number 1 Fender Strat, which by that time I had already put the humbucking pickup in the front. Gibson
Still
humbucker.
have it? Wow.
Still number 1. Still number 1.
So what pickup is that? What is that? Gibson humbucker?
Okay, so this was put in 1969 by the Barney Kessel Guitar Shop in L.A. So
Wow.
I thought it was a PAF, but I did my research and it was slightly after that. So they had the patent already. This is a Zex coil. The guy who invents these things is a gentleman called Scott Loing. He's got something very, very special happening. He just makes these beautiful, beautiful pickups. Before that pickup, I had a DiMarzio stacked humbucker, which was interesting because it didn't have a lot of personality. It was sort of perfect for those parts that wanted the guitar not to have a lot of personality. So it was actually quite utilitarian.
The song and album were produced by Gary Katz, who had gone to work with the band for all of their albums between 1972 and 1980. Roger Nichols was the engineer for the album. Nichols was a Northern California native who had developed his interest in engineering the old-fashioned way. I just tore apart all these radios, which was great because I learned a lot that way. The man was brilliant, earning a degree in nuclear engineering from Oregon State University and working at the San Onofre nuclear power station during its construction between 1965 and 1968. But while he was doing that, he would also spend his days off working in a recording studio. Eventually built his own recording studio with friends in his garage and continued to refine his skills recording local bands and commercial advertisements. After building another larger studio in Los Angeles and developing a side gig supplying hi-fi and audio equipment to other studios, he was picked up by ABC. In their pursuit of musical excellence, Fagen and Becker also wanted the best sound quality they could achieve. Nichols was the man for that job. He remembers, "I thought they were great because they cared about what stuff sounded like and wanted to take time to get things happening right. The other artists I was working with never wanted to do that. They were both hi-fi nuts, especially Walter with his quad electrostatic speakers at home and the latest cartridge and tone arm. The result was an album of impeccable sound quality, and audiences and critics alike took notice. After its release, Penny Valentine of Sounds aptly wrote, "A really superb album, polished up like a diamond, more please." Can't Buy a Thrill was released in November of 1972. Reeling in the Years was released as the album's second single on February the 27th, 1973. It just barely missed the top 10, reaching number 11 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Its legacy has held strong, becoming a favorite of classic rock radio. The song showcases Fagen and Becker's dry, sarcastic tongue amid great songwriting, stellar musicianship, and audio and production polish. Almost 50 years later, Reeling in the Years remains one of Steely Dan's most popular and beloved tracks. Thanks ever so much for watching. Please leave any comments and questions below. Check out the other videos in the series. Thank you ever so much for watching. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios.